I know you're probably waiting for the punchline about our hero, Zaphenath-Paneah. Yes, he really is more commonly known as Joe or Joseph, if you want to get technical. But there's a tale behind that longer name, Zaphenath-Paneah. And you're going to have to keep listening right to the very last minute in 2 days in order to find out what it is. For now, we return to a kid named Joe, except that he really has been transformed during that camel ride to Egypt. He's a man now, young, but toughened by that wrenching experience of being sold into slavery. And now, as the camel caravan pulls into Egypt, Joseph has made up his mind that no matter what happens to him, he's going to be God's man. Now, a couple of interesting points. Joseph is indeed sold into slavery, facing a dead end, without hope. But you know, God has him right where he wants him. God has a plan. Joseph becomes the slave of Potiphar, an Egyptian who is one of Pharaoh's officials. This young Hebrew slave is placed in an environment where the potential is there for God's later workings. Of course, you and I know the rest of the story, but Joe didn't. We know where God is going with this whole thing, but Joe didn't have any clue. But here he is working for Potiphar, who works for Pharaoh. Let's see what happens. Keep in mind, though, slavery is still slavery. And when you're a slave, your options are really limited. Let me illustrate. I've been called to be a minister evangelist. God gave me interests in that area and some aptitude. And He's given me the opportunity. I've been the pastor in wonderful California parishes, Camarillo and Paradise and elsewhere. And then God has given me roles to fulfill on TV with It Is Written, later with Voice of Prophecy, Christian radio ministry with an international audience. In other words, God has given me gifts and the open door to use those gifts for His glory. But what about Joe? I mean, it's wonderful to preach the gospel, and Joseph might have liked to do that, but as a slave in a foreign country, there was no way he was going to get that opportunity. He couldn't give Bible studies. He couldn't organize a home Bible fellowship. He couldn't send out invitations and hold a tent meeting or an evangelistic crusade. Despite any motivations Joseph might have had in those areas, there was no opportunity. There wasn't an open door. You know, about all Joe could do was sweep the floors and do the dishes and make up the beds. In other words, be a slave. He might have had so many dreams of grandeur. I could do this and that and the other. I could turn things upside down around here if God hadn't let me be just a lowly slave. God, why are you wasting me this way? Instead, the Bible tells us that Job simply went about the business of doing the job his master had given him to do. And he did it well. Genesis 39, verses 2-4 says this, "The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant." Friend, listen. Here's an exciting principle that works for us today. While you're waiting for the door to open up, do what you can do, and do it to the very best you can. If you'd like to preach, but instead you're a toll booth attendant, then be the most cheerful, Christ-centered, friendly toll booth attendant in the whole state. Every time you make change, make somebody smile at the same time. If you'd like to be a missionary doctor, but right now you're working as a motel maid, then be the best maid in the whole chain. Strive for excellence. Do your very best, and then when God does open up the bigger door, you'll be ready. 2 more interesting points, if you will, and they're related to this very principle of doing what you can. Notice, Joseph worked hard and he received a promotion. Verses 4-6 say this: Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So he left in Joseph's care everything he had, with Joseph in charge. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Joseph did well at what he could do. It wasn't long before the Lord gave him opportunity to do more. True, Joseph doesn't yet direct worldwide ministry or have his name in headlines. He's not prime minister yet. But because of his faithfulness in small things, he now has some larger responsibilities. In fact, he's in charge of Potiphar's entire household. So point number 2, because of where Joseph is in Potiphar's household, and also because he's rising in the ranks, he's receiving valuable education and preparation for some later things. Again, you and I are peeking behind the scenes and peering into Joseph's future. But can you see God at work here? Month after month, this young man is learning principles of government and organization and management. He doesn't know it yet, but God is soon going to open up more doors, and Joseph will be ready. You know, we often limit God by our own limited vision. A high school student said to himself, "Well, this class is dumb. I know I'm never going to go into this field." So he slacks off and just gets by with a C-. Later on, when God might have wanted to open a certain door in that very area, well, the student doesn't have the necessary expertise to be used by him. So the door remains closed. There's a fascinating book in my library by a Dr. Paul Brand and Philip Yancey. It's entitled Pain, the Gift Nobody Wants. And it describes Dr. Brand's many years as a visionary physician working with leprosy patients in India. It's a marvelous story, filled with flavor and intrigue. But Dr. Brand didn't start out to be a doctor. He was more of a craftsman, a carpenter, working with his hands in design and tool work. That's what he took in college. And later, when his life got steered in the direction of medicine, well, he almost berated himself over the wasted years. Why did I have to spend all of that time going down blind alleys? He wondered to himself and to God. Why didn't I go into medicine from day one? Well, later on, as he worked with leprosy patients whose greatest injuries were coming because they couldn't feel any pain, Dr. Paul Brand found himself, guess where? In the carpenter shop. He had to come up with all sorts of inventive designs for household appliances and special shoes and mechanical devices that would give those rehabilitating lepers job skills. And he was able to look back and say this: ever since medical school, I had wondered if I had misspent those 5 years in the construction field. Now I was thankful to find a redeeming purpose to my circuitous career path. So friend, listen. Wherever you are today, if the hallway in front of you seems to have a locked door at the end of it, just keep marching forward. If you're in a dead-end job or taking some classes that you don't think are leading anywhere, or sitting in church listening to sermons that just aren't working for you right now, they're not clicking spiritually, just keep going. Keep sweeping that floor and making those beds the very best you can. In fact, do like Joseph. Do your very best. And even a little bit more than that. Give 110%. God may be just waiting for that last little burst of excellence before he swings open the door of opportunity for you. One more exciting application before we start thinking about the incredible storms of temptation that are just ahead. Did you notice that Potiphar himself was blessed by Joseph's presence? The Lord blessed his Egyptian's entire household just because Joseph was living there. God's blessings directed at Joe spilled out and touched the lives of everyone around him. In fact, in verse 3 of this chapter, we're told that Potiphar realized the Lord was with Joseph. His master saw that the Lord was with him. Now, this is something I mentioned in yesterday's talk. Joseph didn't drown his new master with a lot of heavy, oppressive religious talk. He didn't push his foreign faith in the boss's face. He just quietly went about his job, always performed with unbelievable excellence and quality, and graciously let it be known that he was God's man. You know, I'd like to have that same kind of influence. My wife Jeannie and I live over in the suburb of Phoenix called Sun City West. I'd like to think that all the neighbors on our block are getting a bit of God's blessing through us. That members of my church where we attend get some of that divine spillover. That people I sit next to on an airplane trip to a speaking appointment will experience some of that same trickle-down effect that Potiphar and his family enjoyed from Joseph. By just having Joseph in their home, they were blessed. Being in the proximity of God's man, life became more abundant and more beautiful for this heathen family. But there's a shadow hanging over the story. A shadow wearing a short skirt and too much makeup, some soft music and perfume, because Mrs. Potiphar's about to make her entrance. God's about to open the next door, but it's the door to the Egyptian penitentiary. Is this how God rewards a person's faithfulness?